I still remember the smell of burnt coffee that morning, the kind that lingers in your kitchen even after you've opened all the windows. I was sitting at my small dining table, papers spread out in front of me, scribbling ideas in a notebook that already had bent corners from how often I carried it around. This business idea had been my obsession for months, maybe even years if I was honest with myself. It was a blend of everything I cared about: creativity, community, and the chance to finally prove to myself that I wasn't just dreaming. I poured hours into researching, sketching out plans, looking up suppliers late at night when the house was quiet and my partner Daniel was already asleep. It felt like my secret garden, something delicate and fragile, and I couldn't stop tending to it. My best friend Lily was the only person I truly trusted enough to share it with. We'd been inseparable since college. She knew everything about me: my worst breakups, my embarrassing habits, the kind of songs I listened to when I cried. I thought she was the safest person in the world. I can still picture the night I first told her. We were sitting on my couch, half-eaten pizza on the coffee table, a bottle of cheap wine between us. She leaned in close, eyes sparkling, and whispered, "This is genius. You're going to change your life with this." My chest swelled with pride hearing her say that. I felt validated, like maybe I wasn't crazy for dreaming this big. But even in that moment, there was something in her smile I couldn't quite place. I told myself it was just my nerves, that I was overthinking. After all, Lily had always been supportive. She'd been the one to push me when I doubted myself, the one who stayed up with me while I worked on early sketches of the logo. I thought we were building memories together, the kind we'd laugh about later when the business finally took off. And Daniel, God, I remember how he used to look at me when I rambled about my idea. He wasn't always patient, but he'd sit across the table, chin resting in his hand, and listen while I sketched diagrams on napkins. Sometimes he'd say, "You're glowing when you talk about this." And that glow, that energy, made me believe I was on the right path. I was so sure he was in it with me, even if he didn't understand all the details. He was my partner in life, and I thought that automatically meant he was my partner in everything else too. The days blurred together in that mix of excitement and exhaustion. I'd work my 9 to 5, come home, and dive right back into my plans. Sometimes I'd forget to eat until midnight, realising too late when my stomach grumbled louder than the hum of my laptop. Lily kept telling me, "You're almost there, don't stop now." She even offered to help with small tasks like researching vendors or organising contacts. I remember feeling so grateful, so blessed to have a friend who believed in me. Looking back, there were warning signs. Little things that didn't make sense at the time, like how she'd always ask me to repeat certain details, or how she'd jot things down in her own notebook, even when I didn't think it was necessary. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just being thorough, just invested in my dream because she cared about me. But the truth is, she was collecting my ideas like puzzle pieces, fitting them quietly into a picture I didn't know she was already building. I had no clue that the two people I trusted most, my best friend and my partner, would become the very reason my dream nearly died. The first real crack in the glass came one Saturday afternoon when I walked into my own living room and found Lily and Daniel sitting too close on the couch, their voices dropping to a whisper the second I opened the door. At the time, I convinced myself they were planning something sweet for me, maybe a surprise to cheer me up after all the late nights I had been working. But there was this flicker in Daniel's eyes, almost like guilt, and Lily's laugh came out too forced, too high-pitched. I ignored it, told myself not to be paranoid, and sat down with them, though I could feel the tension pressing against my chest. A week later, Lily invited me to a new cafe that had just opened downtown. We sat by the window, the late afternoon sun spilling across the table, And she casually mentioned how she had been thinking about starting something of her own. Nothing big, she said, just inspired by you. I love how brave you are. I smiled, my cheeks burning with pride, not realizing that what she was doing was planting seeds. I thought she admired me, when in reality she was rehearsing her lines, testing how much she could tell me without revealing the truth. I kept talking about my suppliers, my logo sketches, my ideas for expansion, spilling every detail because she was the one person I never thought I had to guard myself from. Daniel, meanwhile, had started acting distracted around me. He still kissed me goodnight, but his mind seemed somewhere else. Like when I spoke about my progress, he was only half listening. I chalked it up to him being tired from work, but deep down I felt a shift. Nights grew quieter, heavier, and I'd find myself staring at him while he scrolled on his phone, wondering if he still saw me the same way he once did when he told me I was glowing. I didn't know then that they were building a secret world together, using the pieces of my life as their foundation. The night I stumbled upon Lily's notebook on my kitchen counter, something inside me twisted. She had left it open by accident, and as I flipped through it, my hands started to shake. There were notes written in her sharp handwriting, bullet points that looked exactly like the ones I had shared with her, only she had rearranged them like she was making them her own. My heart dropped, but I shoved the notebook closed and told myself it didn't mean anything. She was just helping, just organising ideas for me, right? That was the lie I fed myself because the truth was too ugly to face. But even lies you tell yourself eventually start to rot. It all unravelled the night Daniel came home, late smelling faintly of Lily's perfume. That sweet floral scent I knew too well, because it used to cling to my own clothes after we spent weekends shopping together. I asked him where he had been, and he mumbled something about grabbing drinks with co-workers. But his shirt had a wrinkle on the collar that looked like someone's hand had been there. I went to bed that night, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight, my mind racing through possibilities I didn't want to admit. The next morning, I tried to shake it off by burying myself in work. I spread my sketches and notes across the kitchen table, determined to keep pushing forward. I told myself that even if Daniel was distant, even if Lily was acting strange, at least I still had my dream. It was the one thing no one could take from me, or so I thought. A few days later, I was scrolling through social media when a post stopped me cold. It was Lily, standing in front of a banner with a business name I had once scribbled in my notebook, smiling proudly as if it was her original creation. My throat went dry, my hands numb as I stared at the screen. The colours, the slogan, even the concept, it was all mine. She had launched my idea without me. I could barely breathe as I read the comments of people congratulating her, calling her brilliant, innovative. I wanted to scream that it was me, that it had been mine all along, but the words stuck in my throat. I called Daniel in a panic, shoving my phone in his face, demanding if he had known. He hesitated just a moment too long before saying, "She probably just got inspired. It's not the same thing." But I knew from that pause that he wasn't surprised. He knew. Maybe he had even helped her. The betrayal hit me like a wave, drowning me in disbelief. I felt my whole body tremble, tears stinging my eyes, not just because she had stolen my business, but because the man I loved, the man who had promised to stand by me, was already slipping through my fingers. It was like my entire world had cracked open, and I was falling straight through the middle. I wish I could say I confronted Lily right then, that I stormed over to her apartment and demanded answers, but the truth is I froze. For days I carried that betrayal inside me like a stone in my stomach, pretending everything was fine because I couldn't yet face the reality that my best friend had stolen not just an idea, but a part of me. At work, I sat through meetings in a haze, doodling in the margins of my notes, my mind looping through memories of late-night conversations when Lily swore she believed in me. I remembered how she would hold my arm and say, "This is going to be huge for you," and how I would smile, completely blind to the knife she was already twisting behind my back. Daniel kept acting like nothing had happened, like it was no big deal. That made it worse. We sat at dinner one night, plates of pasta untouched, and I asked him if he thought Lily had crossed a line. He shrugged, eyes on his fork, and muttered, "Ideas are free. You can't really own them." That sentence cut deeper than he realised. It wasn't just about ideas. It was about trust, about loyalty, about everything we had built together as friends and as a couple. I started noticing how often his phone buzzed with messages he wouldn't let me see. He'd angle the screen away from me, claiming it was just work, but the way he smiled at his phone told a different story. I wasn't stupid. I could connect the dots, but part of me still clung to denial because the alternative was too painful to face. At night, I would lie awake listening to the hum of the fridge, the distant sound of cars outside, and wonder when my life had become so unrecognisable. I felt like a guest in my own home, my own dream stripped from me, my own partner slipping further away with every day. The moment that finally shattered me came when I walked past a new boutique downtown and saw Lily inside with Danielle, their heads bent close together over a counter, her hand resting lightly on his arm. They didn't see me, and maybe that was a blessing because I stood frozen on the sidewalk, heart pounding, eyes burning, realising I wasn't just losing a friend and a partner, I was losing myself. I stood there on that sidewalk watching them like my whole body had turned to stone, the reflection of their closeness flickering back at me through the boutique's glass. My chest ached so sharply. It felt like someone had pressed a fist against my heart and refused to let go. I didn't walk in. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and wandered down the street, barely noticing the city around me. The honking cars, the smell of roasted peanuts from a vendor, the chatter of strangers passing by. All of it blurred into static while my mind replayed what I had just seen over and over until I felt sick. That night I sat alone at the kitchen, the clock ticking so loudly it felt like it was mocking me. My papers still scattered on the table, like remnants of a dream that wasn't mine anymore. I picked one up, a sketch of the original logo I had made months earlier, and tears smudged the ink as they fell. How could she take this from me? How could they both take this from me? Lily knew how much I had poured into it. Daniel knew how much it meant to me, and yet, somehow, they had found each other in the ruins of what was supposed to be my future. It wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation. The next day, I forced myself to see Lily, to look her in the eye and give her a chance to explain. She greeted me at the cafe with that same too bright smile, her hair styled perfectly, her voice dripping with sweetness that suddenly sounded poisonous. "You look tired," she said, stirring her coffee, like she hadn't gutted me in broad daylight. I wanted to scream at her, slam my fists against the table, demand to know why. But when I opened my mouth, all that came out was a quiet, shaking, "Why did you do it?" Her expression didn't even flinch. She just tilted her head, eyes sparkling with a kind of false innocence, and said, "Business is business." I thought you'd understand. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt, because in that moment I realised she didn't see me as her best friend anymore. She saw me as competition, as someone to step over. And Daniel, he was just another accessory in her shiny new world. A piece of the puzzle she had stolen. I left that cafe with my hands trembling, clutching my bag so tightly the straps dug into my skin, vowing to myself that this wasn't how my story was going to end. The days that followed felt like I was walking through molasses, every step heavy, every breath a chore, my mind replaying Lily's words like a cruel mantra I couldn't escape. Business is business. She said it with such ease, like years of friendship meant nothing. Like all the nights we spent crying on each other's shoulders or laughing until dawn were disposable. Erased the second she saw an opportunity. I started noticing their presence everywhere, like ghosts haunting me. Flyers for her new venture showed up around town, the logo eerily similar to the one I had once sketched on napkins. On social media, there were photos of Daniel at her side, smiling, his arm casually draped around her waist. Each image was like a stab, reminding me how quickly my world had been dismantled. I tried to drown myself in routine, going to work, cleaning the apartment, forcing myself to cook meals I could barely swallow. But the emptiness was relentless. I remember one night, sitting on the bathroom floor, the cool tiles pressing against my legs, clutching my notebook like it was a lifeline. I flipped through the pages, each filled with my handwriting, my ideas, my blood and sweat. And I realised I had two choices. Let them steal not just my dream, but my entire identity, or fight for what was mine. That thought terrified me, because fighting meant facing them both, standing up to people I had loved more than anyone. Still, a flicker of fire sparked inside me, something small but undeniable. I began rewriting my plans, reimagining my idea in ways Lily hadn't thought of, expanding it into something bigger, bolder. If she wanted to play dirty, fine, but she could never replicate my vision. Because it came from my heart, from my experiences, from the years I had spent building it piece by piece. Daniel's betrayal still cut the deepest, though. At night, I would lie awake in the empty bed, the sheets cold where he used to sleep, wondering how he could touch her with the same hands that once brushed my hair back gently, or traced the outlines of my drawings with admiration. I hated him for it, but I hated myself more for still missing the version of him I thought I knew. Slowly, though, that longing was turning into something else. Anger, determination, a promise whispered to myself in the dark that I would rise from this, and when I did, neither of them would ever forget it. I don't think anyone really understands what it feels like to lose not just a dream, but the two people you trusted most, unless they've lived it. It's like standing barefoot on broken glass, every step forward, cutting deeper, every memory slicing through you until you're raw. In the weeks that followed, I felt like a shadow of myself, going through the motions of work, smiling at colleagues when inside I was unravelling. The city felt different too. Streets I once walked with Lily now felt tainted. Every corner shop or cafe carrying echoes of laughter that used to be ours. And Daniel, his absence was everywhere. The chair at the kitchen table where he used to sit, the dent in the couch cushion shaped by his weight, the faint scent of his cologne still lingering on a jacket he left behind. I kept asking myself, was I blind, or did they truly change overnight? Had they been plotting together all along, whispering behind my back while I dreamed out loud in front of them? One night I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone, opened Lily's page, and scrolled until I reached a photo of her and Daniel, smiling like they belonged to each other, like they hadn't stolen everything that was mine. My fingers trembled as I hovered over the keyboard, wanting to write a comment, wanting to expose them to the world, to scream the truth into the void of strangers who praised her brilliance. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I saved the photo, tucked it into a folder I had begun creating quietly on my laptop. A folder labelled simply Proof. Because if she thought she could erase me from the story, she was wrong. I started documenting everything. The sketches with dates, old text messages where I shared ideas, even voice notes I had sent Daniel late at night explaining new concepts. The more I gathered, the more my anger sharpened into something almost steady. It was no longer just grief, it was strategy. I realised that the one thing neither of them had counted on was my resilience. They thought breaking my heart and stealing my dream would leave me too shattered to fight. And yes, for a time, they almost succeeded. But as I sat surrounded by the pieces of my life, I began to feel something I hadn't in weeks. Power. I whispered to myself in the quiet of my room, "This isn't over." And for the first time, I actually believed it. The decision to fight back didn't come with fireworks or some grand revelation. It came in the stillness of a Sunday morning, the light seeping through the blinds as I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee gone cold. Staring at my notebook, I realised I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what Lily and Daniel had done to me. If I wanted to survive this, I had to reclaim not only my idea but also myself, so I started small. I reached out to an old professor who once told me my concept had real potential. He picked up the phone with the same warm voice I remembered, and when I explained everything, without names, he said, "If it was yours from the start, then make it yours again. No one can steal your heart. Only your execution." His words lit a spark. I threw myself into work like a woman possessed. I researched competitors, refined my pitch, redesigned the logo to something sharper, something that screamed authenticity. I pulled late nights, not the desperate ones filled with tears, but focused, determined nights where I felt myself slowly piecing together the shards of who I used to be. But even as I worked, reminders of them haunted me. I'd walk past Lily's new storefront and see her logo hanging above the door. People bustling inside, and my stomach would twist. Sometimes I'd even catch a glimpse of Daniel there, his hand on her lower back in a way that once belonged only to me. The betrayal burned fresh each time, but instead of breaking me, it fueled me. Every sight of them together became another brick in the wall of my determination. I won't lie. There were nights I crumbled too. Nights I sat curled up on my bed, clutching a pillow and sobbing into the darkness, because the person who was supposed to love me had chosen someone else, and that someone else had once been the sister I never had. The grief was heavy, but underneath it was a vein of steel growing stronger with every day. Slowly, I started making connections of my own. I attended networking events, even though walking into a room full of strangers terrified me. I shook hands, handed out business cards, told my story in careful fragments, and to my surprise, people listened. They believed in me. They saw the fire in my eyes that Lily could never replicate because it wasn't hers to own. The more I spoke, the more I realised that I didn't need Daniel's empty nods or Lily's fake encouragement. I needed me, and for the first time in months, I was starting to trust myself again. It was around this time that I learned how silence could be just as powerful as words. I stopped reaching out to Lily, stopped trying to decode Daniel's behaviour, and instead poured all of my energy into building something they could never touch, my own strength. The irony was that the more I focused on myself, the more the world began to respond. One evening, I presented my idea at a small local startup event, my hands trembling as I held the microphone. But once I started speaking, the nerves melted away. I talked about the problem I wanted to solve, about the community I hoped to build, and as I looked out at the audience, I saw heads nodding, eyes widening with interest. By the time I finished, people were lining up to shake my hand, to ask questions, to offer advice. That moment was a turning point. For so long I had believed Lily and Daniel had taken everything. But standing on that stage, I realised they had only taken what I had allowed them to. The essence of my idea, the heartbeat of it, was still mine. They could mimic the shell, but they couldn't recreate the soul. Still, their shadows lingered. One night, I accidentally stumbled across a photo online of Lily at some gala. Daniel standing proudly at her side in a suit I had once picked out for him. She was holding an award, smiling like she had invented the cure for loneliness. And my stomach clenched so hard I had to sit down. Rage pulsed through me, hot and bitter, but instead of letting it consume me, I opened my laptop and started drafting. I wrote down every date, every detail, every message I had saved. I wasn't ready to expose her yet, but I wanted to be prepared. The folder marked proof was growing thicker by the day, and with each new file I added, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't voiceless. They thought I'd crumble and disappear. But what they didn't realise was that betrayal doesn't just break people. Sometimes it forges them, and I was becoming someone I had never been before, someone who wasn't afraid to fight back, someone who would make sure when the time came, the truth would be impossible to ignore. The more I built myself back up, the more I began to see Lily and Daniel for what they really were. Not as the people I once loved, but as mirrors reflecting their own emptiness. Lily had the storefront, the logo, the press. She even had Daniel by her side. But when I looked closer at her public appearances or interviews, I saw a hollowness behind her smile. She could rehearse my words, but she could never feel them the way I did because she hadn't lived the nights of doubt, the mornings of quiet determination, the years of carrying the idea when it was nothing but fragile sketches in a notebook. Daniel too looked different to me now. His charm, his easy smile, all of it seemed shallow once I realised it could be bought so cheaply with the illusion of success. I began to pity them both, though the anger never left entirely. It stayed inside me like a coiled spring, ready for the right moment. Meanwhile, my own version of the business was coming alive. I had a small team now, 2 designers and a friend of a friend who was brilliant with marketing. We met in coffee shops, sometimes even in my tiny living room, surrounded by sticky notes plastered on the walls and mugs half filled with cold tea. Those sessions were messy, imperfect, but they were real. And unlike Lily's polished but soulless launch, mine was infused with authenticity. One late night, as I sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by papers, I realised something shocking. I was happy. Not the naive happiness I once had when I thought Lily and Daniel were on my side, but a stronger, harder kind of happiness, born out of survival. That night I whispered to myself, "You are stronger than them. You are stronger than what they did to you." But strength didn't erase the ache. There were still moments when I saw couples walking hand in hand on the street, and my chest tightened with the memory of what Daniel and I used to be. There were nights when a song came on the radio that Lily and I once screamed at the top of our lungs during a road trip, and my throat closed up with grief. Healing wasn't clean, and it wasn't fast. But every time I pushed forward, I reminded myself that the best revenge wasn't just success. It was living fully again, louder and brighter than they ever expected me to. And quietly, deep inside, I began planning the day I would finally reveal the truth. Not just to clear my name, but to show them that they hadn't destroyed me. They had only made me unstoppable. The day of reckoning came sooner than I expected. By then, my project had gained traction. Small articles online, a growing community who resonated with the heart behind my work. People weren't just buying into a product, they were buying into a story, my story, even if they didn't yet know the betrayal behind it. One afternoon, I got an email from an organiser of a regional business expo inviting me to present. My stomach twisted with both fear and excitement, but I knew this was the stage I had been waiting for. I prepared obsessively, refining my presentation until every slide spoke of authenticity. Every word carried the weight of the nights I had fought through loneliness and pain. The morning of the expo, I put on my best blazer, hands trembling as I pinned my badge. And when I arrived at the venue, My heart nearly stopped. Lily was there too. Daniel at her side, their booth positioned not far from mine. She saw me, and for a split second her confident smile faltered, the faintest flicker of panic crossing her eyes. Daniel avoided my gaze, pretending to be absorbed in setting up their display. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, they may have stolen pieces of my past, but this moment belonged to me. When it was my turn to speak, I walked onto the stage with my head high. The lights blinding, but the energy in the room electric. I spoke about the origins of my idea, about resilience, about how sometimes the hardest betrayals give birth to the strongest visions. I didn't name them, but every word was a blade sharpened by truth. The audience leaned in, clapping, nodding, some even wiping their eyes. By the end, I received a standing ovation that filled me with a rush so powerful I thought I might collapse from relief. Later, as I walked past Lily's booth, I saw her forcing a smile, trying to charm passers-by, but the crowd around her had thinned while people gathered near me to ask questions, to connect. Daniel finally looked at me then, his face unreadable, but in his eyes I saw something that almost looked like regret. Maybe he hadn't expected me to rise. Maybe he thought I would disappear quietly, a forgotten casualty of their ambition. But I was standing there, stronger than ever, proof that their betrayal had only carved out space for my own power. That night I went home, exhausted but exhilarated, curling into bed with a smile for the first time in what felt like forever. I wasn't finished yet, but I finally knew. The ending of this story would be mine to write, not theirs. I knew the finale of this tangled story had to be mine, not theirs, and for once I didn't rush it. I let time sharpen me. Let every late night of rebuilding and every early morning of determination fortify the walls they once tried to tear down. When the moment finally came, it was almost poetic. A journalist who had covered Lily's business reached out to me after hearing whispers that my version carried more originality, more depth. She wanted an interview. I agreed. But this time I brought my folder marked proof. Pages of dated sketches, screenshots of messages, voice notes of me explaining details long before Lily's launch. I didn't badmouth her outright. Instead, I told my truth, every piece of it, calm and clear, letting the evidence speak louder than bitterness. The article that followed was explosive. It didn't just highlight my journey, it exposed the cracks in hers. Suddenly people started questioning her narrative, asking uncomfortable questions online, sharing side-by-side comparisons of her work and mine. The comments that once praised her brilliance now buzzed with doubt. Daniel disappeared from her public appearances shortly after. I don't know if he left her or if she pushed him away when the spotlight turned harsh, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. By then, I had something far more important: freedom. The freedom of knowing I had risen from betrayal without letting it poison me forever. My business grew steadily, not overnight like hers, but with roots deep enough to weather any storm. And every time someone wrote to me saying how much my project meant to them, I felt a quiet vindication no award or stolen headline could ever replicate. One evening, months later, I walked past Lily's storefront. It was dark, a for lease sign taped crookedly in the window. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with a strange, calm finality. She had taken what she thought was everything, but in the end she had nothing, because you can't fake heart, you can't fake authenticity, you can't fake resilience. I stood there for a moment, whispering to myself, "You won." And I realised the sweetest revenge hadn't been destroying her, or even exposing her. It had been reclaiming myself, proving that no betrayal could define me unless I let it. I walked away from that empty store with my head high, the night air cool against my skin, carrying not the weight of loss anymore, but the lightness of survival and the certainty that my story was mine and mine alone to tell.